This video is going to be vulnerable for me, but I want to share it in case it can help someone else out there. I recently found out that I have something called Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder, or PMDD. So I'll go over what PMDD is, all the symptoms, give some background and history, as well as my journey to a diagnosis, which was the hardest part, and then how I am managing the PMDD in everyday life, especially as a mom to 2 young children. It took me a lot of years and a lot of doctors to figure all of this out, so I'm hoping that all of the information can be helpful, but feel free to use those timestamps down below too. What is PMDD? PMDD is essentially like PMS on steroids. It's all those physical pains you get before your period, so like the cramping and bloating, along with all of the mood changes that may happen, but to the extreme. PMDD is also much less common than PMS. So if only about 75% of women experience mild PMS symptoms before their period, only about 3 to 8% of women will have PMDD with those extreme symptoms that disrupt their daily life. A common misconception about PMDD is that it's a hormonal imbalance. However, it's not about having more than one hormone than the other. It's actually a sensitivity or an abnormal reaction to the body's normal hormonal changes. It's all hormonal related and has to do with the timing of your cycle too. So if you look at a woman's cycle, there's 4 different phases. The first day of your period is going to begin your menstrual phase, which is usually days 1 to 5, followed by the follicular phase, which is days 6 through 13, and then ovulation usually occurs around day 14, the halfway point of your cycle, and then from ovulation to the beginning of your next cycle, those days of 15 through 28 is known as your luteal phase. Understanding all of this and the different phases will definitely help when I talk about managing symptoms and everything later, but PMDD is affected by all of those dips and rises of your hormones, including estrogen and progesterone. When you first begin your period, your estrogen will begin to rise, and then start decreasing, and progesterone will kind of do the opposite. So it will be steady until it takes a slight rise and dips again. These hormonal changes throughout the month are a sign of a healthy body, which is a good thing, but it's also what causes those PMS symptoms. And then those of us with PMDD, our bodies kind of freak out, have that abnormal reaction to the changes, and then we start getting some really hard to deal with symptoms in that later half of the cycle. What are the symptoms and how do you know if it's really PMDD versus just maybe PMS? Symptoms of PMD usually start earlier than PMS, so like a week or prior to menstruation, and then end within a few days of your period starting. The symptoms you get also are really disrupting your daily life. So you might have trouble like functioning at home, at work, or even have relationship problems during this specified time. I'm going to read you the most common PMDD symptoms off of Johns Hopkins Medicine, and then after that, I'll give some more personal symptoms and some anecdotes as well to kind of paint the picture for you. So it says that the most common symptoms of PMDD are a depressed mood, sadness, hopelessness, feelings of worthlessness, increased anxiety, tension, or feeling like you're on edge all the time, mood swings, self-critical thinking, increased sensitivity to rejection, frequent or sudden tearfulness, increased irritability, anger, or both, conflict with family, coworkers, or friends, especially in the luteal phase, decreased interest in normal activities, concentration problems, fatigue, lethargy, or lack of energy, changes in your appetite such as binge eating, overeating, or craving certain foods, changes in sleeping patterns such as excessive sleeping or difficulty sleeping, so like kind of like insomnia, feelings of being overwhelmed or out of control, and then physical symptoms such as breast swelling or tenderness, headaches, joint pain, bloating, and weight gain. So it's a pretty long list, and you can imagine that having these symptoms for 1 to 2 weeks at a time can really throw a loop into your daily life and your schedule and routine. because for a couple weeks you're fine and then everything hits. And very often the luteal phase is coined hell week for these reasons. And for me, I'm checking off like 90% of all of these boxes. They apply to me during that specified time that PMDD is at its worst. It's been some really hard stuff to deal with over the years. And the two main symptoms that affect me the most are one, brain fog, and then fatigue. So with the brain fog, I almost feel like there's a piece of like plastic wrap, like cling wrap, constantly in front of me. And then my head almost feels like it's filled with cotton balls, and I have trouble thinking, remembering, concentrating, focusing. I feel very spacey and out of it. The brain fog is kind of a consistent thing for me, but it definitely gets worse as I get closer to my period. It gets heavier and things seem more foggy. And then the fatigue is honestly worse than like pregnancy tired. You just feel like you got hit by a bus, and it doesn't matter how much sleep you're getting, you will still wake up tired and have trouble like keeping your eyes open during the day. I just would feel like my eyes would start to cross and like my brain is almost like shutting down or something. Sometimes it can get so bad that I just need to lay down and sleep for like 2 hours in order for some of it to go away. And that's really hard to do as a mom with young kids, because like before my son was born and it was just my daughter, she was like 2 or 3 years old, and I couldn't like have the energy to take care of her or be awake. So I would just lay down and set her up in front of the TV with a snack and just hope that everything would be okay once I got up, but I couldn't manage. Another hard one is feeling all of that tension, anxiety, and just feeling like I'm on edge or out of control within my own body. It didn't matter how much yoga I did or how often I journaled or any like relaxation technique in the book. I still had just like all of this like pent up energy, and I'd almost describe it like things were like crawling under my skin and I just couldn't shake them off. Feeling paranoid, like my husband doesn't love me anymore, or I don't love him, I'd be better off leaving. And then feeling like very detached from him and the kids in that later half of my cycle. And then the dark and depressed moods with feelings of like hopelessness or worthlessness. And when you talk to people and read their stories, another common symptom is like suicidal ideation, which can be really scary stuff, especially when you can't rationalize and fully understand what is going on. Because like half of the month you're fine, and then the rest of the month you almost become like a different person. I can get very irritable and feel rageful at times. You know, I've lashed out on our cat, my husband. I've been so angry where I've like stabbed our kitchen table with like a knife before. I've punched walls, I've kicked in doors, I've thrown glassware, and it's like all stuff I am not proud of course, and have done my best to hide out of embarrassment. And then I get all of these really bad physical symptoms. So like I've always gotten really bad cramps and bloating. My boobs get really sore, joint pain, and then I feel like I get these like heavy legs. So like almost like there's more gravity. All of me just feels so much heavier than normal, like in the first half of my cycle. Looking back, it honestly all makes sense. I got my period when I was 10, almost 11, and just ever since I've had really heavy periods, bad physical symptoms, this like intermittent depression where like some weeks I'm fine, other weeks I'm hopelessly depressed. The catalyst that really made things worse for me was pregnancy, or rather postpartum, because it is a huge hormonal event. Things just seemed to get worse for me after having my daughter. The symptoms were more intense and just becoming more and more unmanageable on my own. Part of me wondered, is this just what it's like to be a mom? You hear about mommy brain and being tired. Of course, you're not sleeping very well, but I just felt like there was this extra layer of something going on, like physically inside of me, and not just like dealing with this stuff because I'm a mom now. So I saw a lot of specialists. I started with a neurologist thinking, you know, it's the head with all the brain fog. Got an MRI. I saw a cardiologist, got EKGs. I saw the ENT for like a ringing in my ears. My ophthalmologist never saw anything wrong, even though I was having like this blurry vision. I saw a functional medicine doctor who told me to maybe try going gluten-free, and like all my tests, all my blood work was coming back fine, which was so frustrating because it's like I still was feeling like crap and just like having such a hard time functioning and feeling like myself. I will say a lot of the doctors I went to were men, and being newly postpartum, they're like, oh, it's just, you're a mom, that's all it is, you're a mom now. But I was not satisfied with that answer, so I just kept looking. I worked with a psychiatrist for a couple of years, trying different medications, and we talked about things like maybe ADHD or bipolar. But since my symptoms weren't consistent enough, she wasn't able to like give me that diagnosis. And the hardest part about all of this, you guys, is my periods have always been irregular. They can range from anywhere from like 26 days to like 90 plus. I've also been on antidepressants for the majority of my adolescence and my adult life, and then I had never been on any type of birth control pill before to help like regulate my cycles and pinpoint when my worst symptoms were happening. So I think a mix of being on antidepressants and not having a regular cycle before made it really hard for me and even other doctors out there to understand what was going on. The best and probably the easiest way to know if you have PMDD is to start tracking your symptoms. If you're relating to any of this, that is totally where I would recommend starting. A doctor or OBGYN will probably want to see at least about 2 to 3 months worth of mood tracking and symptom tracking. So that is exactly what I did here. So I'd start with the day, what day of my cycle I was on, write down one word or like the theme of that day. I'd rate my brain fog on a scale from mild, moderate to heavy. I'd know other symptoms as well as if I worked out that day. And after a while, you'll start to see and notice patterns, because with PMDD, about a week prior to menstruation is when you'll start seeing the mood and physical symptoms ramp up, and then they tend to stop within the first couple days of bleeding and starting your period. It took some time to make sense of these patterns, especially since my cycle was irregular for so long, because it's like I would begin my period, ovulate who knows when, and then I'd have this super long luteal phase that I was like stuck in and struggling through until my next period started. And then I actually got pregnant with baby number 2, and I honestly felt amazing. A lot of women with PMDD actually report feeling great during pregnancy because they're not having their cycle during that time. And I know that was the case for me. However, once I did get my period back after my son was born, that is when I started to notice all of the PMDD symptoms again. It was like right on cue, I got all of the mood and physical symptoms back, and I was like, no, I'm not going through this again. I'm figuring something out. There has to be something out there that can help me. So that is when I revisited with my doctor and started birth control. And now with my period being so predictable, my symptoms are also really predictable. PMDD, at least for now, is kind of like chronic pain in a way, where the symptoms will be with you for life, but there are things you can do to help manage it through different points in the month. So what's a girl to do? What's a mom to do when you're dealing with all of these symptoms, especially when you're supposed to be taking care of other people? The things that have helped me the most are: 1, starting birth control. This has been my biggest saving grace so far, and everyone's body is going to have a different reaction to different types of birth control. So it's a matter of finding one that will work best for you. The birth control I take is a combination pill called Vestura, and since starting it back in late July, so about 6-7 months ago, I've noticed a huge improvement, especially with my mood symptoms at the later half of my cycle. I'm not getting that intense irritability anymore, like the creepy crawlies under my skin where I just like feel like I'm losing it or out of control. My energy levels have even been elevated, and when I am bleeding, the bleeding is so much less and the cramps are so much more manageable than what they used to be. So that is such a bonus and something I'm very thankful for, and I'm sure my family is thankful for too, because I'm able to now be the mom and the wife that I want to be throughout the month. And with my period being more regulated and predictable within those 28 days, I'm better able to schedule my time, activities, and tasks to when I have the most energy during my cycle. So that's been super helpful, because now in the beginning part of my cycle, I'm able to work on more high energy tasks desk or playing with the kids more, or even tasks that take more concentration, or activities that require me to be more social, so like planning a play date or a lunch date with a friend. And then in the later half of my cycle, I'm then able to do more low-key activities. So stuff that doesn't take as much energy out of me, and maybe more like sit-down activities with the kids, like crafts or something, instead of like being up on my feet and moving. And then I also have a few period tracking apps on my phone. I just use the free versions of them and I like them for different reasons, but I like how Moody reminds me to take my birth control pill every morning. And then with Lively, I'm able to see which day I'm on in my cycle, and it gives me like little quotes too every day. Just kind of that's empowering and reminding me that I'm not crazy. But I like how the apps keep me on track and remind me which day in my cycle that I am, to kind of expect how I should be feeling that day. Because especially in the later half of my cycle, when I'm in the thick of it, it can sometimes be really hard to think rationally. And so when I see it on my phone, oh, yep, I am, day 26 in luteal, it kind of all clicks and makes sense of why I might be feeling how I am. My new doctor who I found and really like, she also started doing some pulse therapy with my antidepressant. So in the beginning half of my cycle, I take 75 milligrams of Zoloft, and then after ovulation day, it bumps up to 100 milligrams. Or some women only take an antidepressant during their luteal phase. It can vary case by case and depending on how your own body reacts, but a lot of women find success with leveling out those hormonal changes during the luteal phase with an antidepressant. And then other things that can affect my hormones, I definitely have to be more careful with them in the later half of my cycle. So diet-wise, I actually cut out caffeine completely. I switched from regular to decaf or something like an herbal tea. And then alcohol too. I'm not a huge drinker, but every time I had alcohol, especially in my luteal phase, it would mess me up. Even after one drink, it would make me feel like I was hungover for 2 to 3 days afterwards. My brain fog got so much more intense and my mental state totally declined. I'm not gonna lie, the coffee thing has been hard as a mom, but anything I ingest that affects my hormones when my body is already internally struggling to do so, it's just not worth it to me and helps me feel better overall. Also making sure that I prioritize my sleep. Again, hard to do as a mom to young children, but sleep has been so important to me and making sure that I get enough of it. So sometimes I have to go to bed right after the kids go to bed and I don't get that me time that I'm craving. And on those days where maybe baby's up or I'm not sleeping well because of the insomnia, I really feel the symptoms even worse the following day, which again is hard and just means I have to call it an early night that day too. And then also limiting my screen time as well as limiting stress any way that I can. The blue light from our phone, our screens can all affect our hormone production. And so that's something I have to be really careful with. And then stress with cortisol. And this is stuff like working out if I am stressed, or journaling or talking to my husband to get things off my chest. Therapy has also been really helpful for me. I have virtual appointments every other week, and in those sessions, I'm able to just talk things out and like figure out smart ways to deal with like all of these big emotions that I'm having. Saying no or rescheduling something when I currently have too much on my plate, and then also delegating as much as I can. The more stressed that I am, the worse my PMDD symptoms seem to be. So finding ways to limit or at least mitigate that stress can be really helpful for me throughout the month. Finding support from women who also have PMDD. I personally don't know anyone who has it in real life, so my main source of community has been on Reddit, but it's actually been really helpful to learn more about the diagnosis or to just vent, or at least to feel more validated and relatable and know that you're not going through it all by yourself. And the worst part of PMDD for me is how it affects my family. I have an almost 5-year-old daughter and a 9-month-old son, and it kills me that I sometimes just cannot be the mom for them that I want to be. My daughter is so high energy, and it's been hard with my energy coming and going to like keep up with her, especially through those toddler years. She wants to play, but sometimes mom can't because I'm too tired, or I can get angry or snappy with her over the smallest, dumbest things that are age appropriate for her, but it's not her or it's a me thing. And a lot of it's internal anger that just gets taken out on her or my husband. But all of these strategies have really helped me and have helped me come a long way. So I make sure to apologize to my daughter and let her know that she's done nothing wrong and it's just mom who's having a hard day. And then I might give myself like a 5 or 10 minute timeout in my bedroom so I have more time to ground myself and be the mom that I want my children to have. Getting a diagnosis of PMDD honestly came as such a relief to me. I feel like at least having a reason, a name for the crazy has been the most helpful part. I know this video isn't very typical for my channel, my motherhood channel, but I hope it can help someone out there. And if it helped you, make sure to give this video a thumbs up so others can see it. Good luck, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!